There's a skyscraper in Shanghai with a hole punched straight through it, near the very top, big enough to see from miles away. The first time you notice it, it looks like a mistake, like someone forgot to finish that section, or a chunk of the building just fell out. It didn't. That hole was designed on purpose, argued over, redesigned, and finally built exactly the way it is for a reason almost nobody who looks up at it actually knows. To understand why, you have to start with something most people get wrong about wind and tall buildings. You'd probably picture wind hitting a skyscraper the way it hits a wall, a steady push, harder when it gusts, easing off when it calms down. That's not really what happens. As wind moves around a tall, flat-sided building, it doesn't just slide past, it peels off the sides in swirling little pockets, first off one edge, then the other. Engineers call this vortex shedding, and it happens constantly in a rhythm. Left, right, for as long as the wind keeps blowing. On its own, one of those little sideways pushes is nothing. The building that size barely notices it. Though the real danger shows up when that rhythm happens to match the building's own natural sway. Here's the easiest way to picture it. Think about pushing a kid on a swing. If you push at random moments, nothing much happens. The swing barely moves, but push at exactly the right point in each swing, again and again, and even small pushes add up into something huge. That's resonance. It's the same principle that tore apart the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in 1940, where wind found the bridge deck's natural rhythm and turned a steady breeze into a collapse. Skyscrapers face a quieter version of the same threat. And one of the ways to diffuse it is almost absurdly simple. Stop the wind from building a rhythm in the first place. That's exactly what the Shanghai World Financial Center was built to do. Completed in 2007, the tower originally called for a large circular opening near its peak, a hole for wind to pass straight through instead of piling up pressure and peeling off in those synchronized bursts. Simple idea, let the wind through, and it never gets the chance to start pushing in rhythm. But the circle never got built. When residents saw the design, many of them noticed something the architects hadn't fully accounted for. A giant circular opening near the top of a tower in a city with a long and painful history with Japan looked uncomfortably close to the rising sun on the Japanese flag. In a country where that history still runs deep, the reaction wasn't small. The design went back to the drawing board, not because the physics failed, but because the shape did. What came out the other side was the trapezoid opening you can actually see today. Same underlying idea, same wind passing function, completely different silhouette. The hole in that building exists in the exact shape it does today because of a compromise between a wind tunnel and a city's memory, which might be the strangest sentence you'll hear about skyscraper design this year, and it's completely true. You might assume every super tall building with a wind problem eventually gets its own version of that hole. Most don't, and the reason is its own story. In Chicago, there's a building now called the St. Regis Chicago. Most people who watched it get built still know it as Vista Tower. Partway through construction, engineers ran a scale model through wind tunnel testing, standard procedure for a building that thin and that tall. What came back wasn't good. The building would sway, not enough to threaten the structure, but enough that people near the top on windy days could genuinely start to feel seasick. Their fix wasn't a hole. It was an entire floor left completely empty. The 83rd level of Vista Tower has no walls, no windows, nothing but open air and a permeable screen around the edge, letting wind rush straight through instead of slamming into a solid surface. Engineers call it a blow-through floor, and from the street it just looks like a dark, unlit band wrapped around the tower. Nothing to suggest that an entire story of one of the tallest buildings in Chicago was deliberately left unfinished on purpose forever. And that's not even the strangest part of how Vista Tower handles wind. Near the top of the building, engineers also installed massive tanks holding roughly 400,000 gallons of water. When wind pushes the tower one way, That water sloshes the opposite direction, working alongside the blow-through floor to cancel out the sway before anyone inside ever notices it happened. So why didn't Shanghai just build a blow-through floor? And why didn't Chicago just punch a hole through Vista Tower? Partly it comes down to the building's shape and height. Partly it's what a specific wind tunnel test happens to reveal is necessary. And partly, as Shanghai found out, it comes down to things that have nothing to do with engineering at all. There's a third approach, and it might be the strangest one yet, because instead of hiding the solution inside the building, this one turns it into a tourist attraction. Taipei 101, once the tallest building in the world, doesn't have a hole, and it doesn't have an empty floor. Somewhere between its 87th and 92nd floors hangs a massive gold steel sphere, 660 tons of it, about 18 feet across, suspended on thick steel cables like the world's largest pendulum. Visitors can walk right up to a viewing platform and watch it hang there, doing on a calm day apparently nothing at all. It's not decoration. It's called a tuned mass damper, and the idea behind it is almost the opposite of Shanghai's hole or Chicago's empty floor. Instead of letting wind pass through the building, this approach lets the building sway and then fights back from the inside. When wind pushes the tower one direction, the sphere's own momentum makes it lag behind, swinging the opposite way like a passenger bracing against the far side of a bus that just braked hard, as that counter motion cancels out a meaningful share of the building's sway before it ever reaches the people inside. For most of the year, the ball barely seems to move enough to notice. But then, in August 2015, Typhoon Soudelor hit Taiwan, with sustained winds over 100 miles an hour, gusting even higher. And the damper did something it had never done before. It swayed a full meter from its resting position, wrestling against the storm in front of visitors, watching from the observation deck below, filming it on their phones. It was engineered to handle exactly this. Winds up to 135 miles an hour, and it held. The building swayed. The people inside it didn't get sick. Nothing broke. 3 buildings, 3 completely different answers to the exact same invisible problem. Shanghai cuts a hole and lets the wind straight through. Chicago leaves a floor empty and adds sloshing water to fight back. Taipei hangs a 660-ton pendulum in open air and lets the whole city watch it work. What's easy to miss is that none of these solutions were the first idea anyone had. Every one of them came after an earlier, simpler plan ran into a wind tunnel, a city council, or a resident with a very good point, and got sent back to the drawing board. The finished building is never the first draft. It's whatever survived the argument, and that argument never really ends. Wind engineers don't design a building once and move on. They keep testing, keep modelling, keep watching how real storms compare to their predictions. Because every super tall building is, in a sense, a permanent experiment running in public. The tuned mass damper in Taipei is still swinging today, right now, adjusting to whatever the wind outside happens to be doing in this exact moment, in front of anyone who cares to look up. And there's no single correct way to fight wind at that height. Just different buildings, each one solving the exact same invisible problem in whatever way its particular pressures, physical, financial, sometimes even political, demanded. Which means the next time you look up at a super tall building and spot something that seems off, a hole where there shouldn't be one, a floor that's strangely dark, a shape that twists for no obvious reason. You're very rarely looking at a flaw. You're looking at the last visible trace of a fight between that building and a wind that never stops trying to find its rhythm.